Today's topic is a little bit different because we are going to talk about human rights. Stay there to discover more. What are human rights?
Human rights are the rights of human beings, regardless of their race, sex, nationality, ethnicity, language, region, or any other location. Human rights includes the right to life, freedom of opinion and expression, the right to work and education, among others.
Human rights didn't come up all at the same time, and just on the 10th December 1948 was signed the Declaration of Human Rights, one big conquest to humanity, if I may say it.
The immigrants with whom I was in contact with were mainly from South and Central Asia, so they usually had to travel far, leaving their country of origin based on the hope of a better life, without any certainty that in fact their life would be better. Most of the time they arrive here looking for a job that ends up leading them to the conclusion that they have to work in the agriculture sector, mainly in the greenhouses that exist in that area. In these greenhouses, they are explored by working almost sun to sun and receiving much less than they deserve, and what they receive is not enough to have a life with basic conditions. They usually don't work under a contract, and that means they don't have stability or assurance in relation to the source of income. Despite all of this, the conditions end up being better here than in their country of origin, but that does not mean that this is fine.
In 1971, the expression war on drugs emerged, declared by former US President Richard Nixon, and which quickly spread throughout the world. This concept, called war on drugs, is a set of prohibition policies that lead to the inevitable discrimination of countries, such as Latin America, which are considered to be responsible for the production of large quantities of illicit substances.
A lot of the time, the population on these most vulnerable regions that Maria was talking about has no other option than to resort to this illegal traffic. The problem with these laws created by Richard and more developed countries is that they aren't really the solution to this problem. The only thing that they do is incarcerate and isolate these populations from society and put them in the eyes of the world as enemies or even monsters that need to be stopped no matter what. So this war on drugs isn't exactly a war against the drugs, but against people. And here's where I ask myself, where are the so-called human rights to these populations?
The disastrous results of this war on drugs do not end all sources of production and distribution of these substances. It only creates economic incentives for other individuals, equally interested in accumulating capital, to enter the market and fill the void left by those who were killed or imprisoned.
In the early, scientific knowledge should provide better well-being for all and provide a foundation for everyone to be treated equally. Throughout story, scientific progress has saved millions of lives and ensured the quality of life for many others.
Throughout history, the scientific progress has allowed to preserve millions of lives, with vaccine and with antibiotic, for example. It also guaranteed a higher quality of life to other people, namely with diabetics and insulin. So we can conclude that science has promoted the most basic human right to live.
When we talk about education, according to the UIS data for the school year ending 2018, right now there are about 258 million children who are not enrolled in school. Girls are less likely to attend school than boys because girls are at a higher risk of being attacked when going to school, and families have a hard time affording their new uniforms. But around the world, the major reasons why kids don't attend school is because they live in an area with political and economic instabilities or are dealing with income poverty.
How to ensure those rights? The fulfillment of the right to education can be assessed using the 4 as framework created by the former UN Special reporter of the Right Education, Katarina Tomskevty.
The truth is that not all students have the conditions to have a proper education at home while in online school. A lot of people have to take care of their younger siblings, a lot of people have to do housework, a lot of children don't have a room in their house where they can be completely focused and alone. So this means that not all children have the same opportunity to learn, and it means also that their education can be tremendously affected by this pandemic.
Literature can mobilize individual or collective changes aimed at improving everyone's life. Also, in some cases, it convinces us that the idea defended by the author is correct, leading us to join a cause. Literature makes us more understanding and open to what is going on with us, but also with others, given the number of situations and opinions to which we are exposed in the literature.
These characteristics are directly related to the importance of literature in human rights due to its capacity to raise awareness and change in people, which makes them reflect on themselves, on others, and on society. It was a literature that triggered some of the great changes in the mentality of the population and the respect for the basic rights of each one, mobilizing, for example, civil wars. These changes culminated in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
Malala is a Pakistani woman and is known as the youngest person to win a Nobel Peace Prize. She is extremely important in the fight for women's rights in education, both in Pakistan and in the world. Anne Frank was born in Germany, and her whole story takes place in Amsterdam in the secret annex. She was Jewish, so for that reason she had to hide with her family in an attic that was provided by colleagues from Anne's father. When she started writing, she was still a teenager and she was not even 14 years old at the time. Anne is a girl who unfortunately did not have the opportunity to become an activist like Malala, precisely because both she and her entire family that was in this annex were discovered and they were all taken to a concentration camp.
Music and human rights, what's the connection? Can music be a human rights ambassador?
Music plays a key role in promoting human rights in various levels.
Over the years, Portuguese composers have been expressing themselves through music to combat inequalities, express their opinion, their discontent, their ideas and values. Examples of these composers are Zeca Afonso, Sérgio Godinho, José Mário Branco, Fernão de Lopes Graça, Carolina Deslandes, Luís Represas, and others.
Moving on to how jazz actually relates to human rights, I'd like to start by mentioning that jazz was born in the midst of an African American culture present in the USA. Now, this is due to the fact that when, about 200 years ago, when African men and women were brought to the United States to be used as slaves, these used to sing random tunes while they worked. These tunes never followed a specific tone and varied in tempo, which are, as I referred earlier, the fundamentals of jazz. Jazz was a very big part of American citizens' life, and as Martin Luther King said in 1964 at the Berlin Jazz Festival, jazz speaks for life, and if you think for a moment, you will realize that they take the hardest realities of life and put them into music, only to come out with some new hope or sense of triumph. This is triumphant music.
As you know, many artists were exiled and killed because of the censorship and the violation of freedom. Well, I can use an example. In Brazil, we had Chico Buarque. He wrote a lot of songs during the military dictatorship. And the last thing I want to talk about and say is about the work of the Italian composer Francesco Lutoro. Well, he spent 3 decades gathering thousands and thousands of songs, symphonies, and operas written during the Holocaust by prisoners. He was able to collect all these songs, and he built this this big concert in Jerusalem.
By definition, feminism is the ideological movement that fights for equality between men and women. For many centuries, as the rules of society were dictated by men, female oppression was socially accepted by men. I, personally, as a feminist, prefer to define feminism as the radical belief that we are all equal. Feminism fights for everyone who are exploited and oppressed, as well as for those who suffer from some kind of inequality. This is exactly why feminism is directly related with social inequalities and human rights. In its true essence, feminism comes along with anti-racism, LGBTQIA plus rights, environmental justice, combating precariousness, anti-capitalism, and the right to housing, health, and education. We won't have a feminist society until we don't reach all these other concepts.
In 1990, Paris is Burning, a documentary about the ballroom culture and the black queer community presence in New York, came out and is still considered one of the most important documentaries about the LGBTQIA+ community. In that same year, Madonna released a single called Vogue that was on top of all the charts and that was inspired by a style of dance created in these balls. In that time, it was like a light of hope for these people that all of a sudden had lots of recognition and some more representation.
The struggle for rights must be an ongoing, unceasing, and unquestionable process. This applies to all categories of rights, especially those that contribute to the conservation and preservation of human dignity.
I'm receiving a message saying that our time has come to an end. So I will just say a last thing. Although much has already been made since 1948, there are still many, many battles to fight. Thank you very much for your time.
And yeah, goodbye.